Remember the Florida principal that hypnotized dozens of students, and 3 of those students ended up dying in the same year? One of them just a day after being hypnotized? You probably don't because it's not a well-known case. I just listened to Civil's episode about this, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown. This is George Kinney, and in 2011 he was the principal at Northport High School. He started hypnotizing students to help them achieve their goals. One of them was 16-year-old Wesley. He really wanted to go to Juilliard, and George said he could help. But a friend said that after these sessions, Wesley would have trouble remembering his own name. George was also diagnosing students with disorders and teaching them how to hypnotize themselves, all without having a license to do so. If you want to know the outcome of this case and if these families truly get justice, go listen to Court Junkie's new podcast, Civil. Episode 2 is The Hypnotist Principal.
He was kidnapped and held captive for 10 years. This is the sickening story of Tanya Cash. The man who kidnapped her was released from prison this year, so it is important to get as much awareness about this case out there as possible. And of course, trigger warning, we're going to be going into essay and other graphic details. Tanya's parents divorced when she was 11 years old, and soon after, her dad started dating a new woman. She did not like her dad's girlfriend, nor did they get along. So when this new girlfriend moved into their home, she was really, really unhappy. Tanya expressed her frustration in different ways, as a teenager normally does. She would lash out, she would pick fights, skip school, and very often run away as well. In 1995, Tanya became friends with the 37-year-old security guard in her middle school. I have no words. She was 14, he was 37. Tanya and Thomas Hose would meet under the stairwell, and he would express how much he wanted to kiss her, and eventually they did just that. And in this really, really clear case of grooming, Thomas convinced Tanya that her family did not love her, but he did, so she could go live with him instead of this supposed loveless household she was in. On top of that, he would give her presents like cigarettes, candy, and money. At 14 years old, Tanya was convinced that this man loved her and that she loved him. She thought that this is what love looked like. It was February 10th, 1996, when Thomas finally brought Tanya to his house. The house that he shared with his parents and 22-year-old son. But as you could have guessed, this wasn't love. This was grooming and kidnapping. So he locked her in his bedroom for 10 years. I just want to take a second to say I cannot even begin to imagine what it was like for Tanya in these years, especially being locked inside this room in a house that Thomas shared with his adult son and his parents. For the first few years, Tanya was not allowed to go outside. She was only allowed to use the bathroom in a bucket in his room and was basically there for Thomas's own personal pleasure, if you catch my drift. It wasn't until 2000 when Thomas gave her a new identity, Nikki Diane Allen, Tanya began to realize that this was not normal. This was not the way things were supposed to be. He finally introduced her to his parents as Nikki and said that she was moving in with him, and she was allowed out on a curfew. Part 2 up right away. Hi guys, welcome back to part 2. This is Tanya Cash's story. 4 years after her kidnapping, Thomas gave her a new identity, and she was allowed out on a strict curfew. And for the next 6 years, she was only allowed to visit 2 places, the church and the local deli. Tanya became friends with the couple who owned the deli, and through having conversations with them and talking to them, she began to understand that the situation she was in was not normal. In fact, it was very, very illegal, and she was a victim. Eventually, she told them everything, and they contacted their son, who was a retired police officer. Coincidentally, he had been assigned to her case. Tanya was then reunited with her family, but her nightmare didn't end there. Her father insisted that he didn't believe her and that there were 2 sides to every story and that he wanted to hear her kidnapper's side. I don't have to say it, I think we're all thinking it. Now the man who kidnapped her has been released from prison. I cannot emphasize enough how this just boggles my brain. It boggles my brain. This man held her captive for 10 years and they released him. Where is the sense in this? He did it once, he's gonna do it again. This is a really, really common start for serial killers. We see it all the time on the stories we hear and watch, and even the ones I cover on my page. That's how they start. Why would you release him from prison? But anyways, what do you guys think? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And again, If you want to hear my announcement and be one of the first ones to hear it, go to my Instagram and follow me there and stay tuned because it's coming really, really, really soon. And I know I keep saying this, but it's been a whole process and I'm really excited for you guys to learn what this is and that I can share this with you all so soon.
This is the gruesome case of Kimberly Proctor. On March 2010, 18-year-old Kimberly was lured to her friend's house. She was tortured, sexually assaulted, sodomized, and then stuffed in a freezer to die. This all happened in British Columbia, Canada, when Kimberly was new to Pacific Secondary School and she met 16-year-old Cruz Wellwood and 17-year-old Cameron Moffat. The two boys were best friends and they were known to be troubled teens, especially Cruz, who his father was already in jail for multiple essays and the murder of a 16-year-old girl. In February 2009, Cruz posted a blog titled "Early Warning Signs of a Serial Killer." And then he listed 14 common traits and wrote the following. The peculiar thing is I meet all 14 criteria. Around this time, Kimberly started dating a boy named Zach, and after a few months, their relationship ended. And that's when Kimberly went to Cruz and Cameron for some comfort, but the two boys wanted to date her now that she was single, but she wasn't interested in being in a new relationship. The two boys felt rejected and lashed out at Kimberly through MSN, calling her nasty names and even went as far as telling her that she was gonna die. But you see, what no one knew, especially Kimberly, was that Cameron and Cruz were not joking. It's been said that the boys were into very dark things. They drank blood together, they watched sadistic porn, and they fantasized about SA and bondage. So not long after, Cruz and Cameron messaged Kimberly again and asked her if she wanted to come over so that they can apologize and talk in person. While Cruz was messaging Kimberly, he was also talking to Cameron, and they spoke about all the disturbing things that they were going to do to Kimberly if she agreed to meet with them. Kimberly really did see the good in everyone, so she agreed to meet, and the next morning at around 10:30 a.m., she went to Cruz's house. The two boys agreed that the code to attack Kimberly was to say, "I think I'm going to make some KD," which in Canada just means mac and cheese. When they tackled Kimberly, they first tied her hands and ankles with tape and then stuffed a sock in her mouth. They SA'd and beat her for hours while doing other very disturbing things to her. They then put her body in a freezer, and Cruz went on his computer to send Kimberly a message in order to build himself a cover-up story in case he was questioned by police. Later that evening, Cameron asked his ex-girlfriend to come over, possibly to do the same thing to her, but luckily she didn't fall for it. This is part 2 of Kimberly Proctor's case. The next morning, both boys put Kimberly's body in a hockey bag. They took a bus to a nearby trail and threw her body under a bridge and set it on fire. At this point, everyone was looking for Kimberly, but at 7 p.m. that night, a group of boys who were hanging around the bridge found her burnt body and called police. Cruz began bragging about what he did to Kimberly to so many people, including his girlfriend, and when he told her, she said the following: "I'll always be here no matter what you do." And even at school, Cruz heard people talking about Kimberly, and he stood up and screamed to everyone that nobody cares and that he's happy that she's dead. Cameron and Cruz constantly talked about the investigation through MSN chat, and Cameron told Cruz the following: "Since we killed that bee and it wasn't too hard, we should do it again." The two boys were finally brought in for questioning and admitted that they did see Kimberly that morning, but she had left early to go to school. Police bugged their cell phones, their houses, and the park where they hung out a lot, and they also looked at their Google searches, their old text messages, and found a lot of disturbing evidence. On June 18, Cruz and Cameron were arrested for Kimberly's murder, and on their way to and back from the courthouse, they recorded their conversation and heard both boys making jokes about the murder. In 2011, Cameron and Cruz pleaded guilty for first-degree murder and were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 10 years. Even though this case is extremely tragic and gruesome, Kimberly's family really wanted the public to know so that the two boys are never set free.
This is Mia Marcano, and she was killed by a maintenance worker in her own apartment complex in 2021. Mia was described by friends and family as funny, sarcastic, athletic, and full of life. She worked at the leasing office at her own apartment complex in Orlando, Florida. On September 24th, 2021, Mia was supposed to be flying home to Fort Lauderdale to see her dad. She moved to Orlando shortly after high school to attend Valencia College. Mia was in constant contact with her family, whether it be Instagram, Snapchat, so when they didn't hear from her when she got off work at her job at 5 p.m. and missed her flight, they became worried. Her family members immediately called the police. Police entered Mia's bedroom and found a small dresser barricading the door, along with a necklace and a broken box cutter. Mia was always seen wearing that necklace, and the box cutter didn't belong to anyone. They also found dry blood on her pillowcase. Mia also owned several Apple products, which they were unable to locate because her phone had been turned off. Mia's family arrived in Orlando, and when they were in her room, they noticed a silver car circling the parking lot. The driver saw Mia's cousin Callie looking out the window and attempted to flee but hit a parked car. Mia's family confronted the man and accused him of sending aggressive text messages to Mia. The man identified himself as Armando Caballero, a maintenance worker at Mia's apartment complex. Mia's family remembered that she once told them that she was being harassed by a maintenance worker. After a sleepless night and putting up lots of missing person posters, Mia's family decided to do their own surveillance on Armando. At one point, he pulls a blanket out of his car, and Mia's grandma screams and says, "Oh my gosh, I gave her that blanket." It was a pink blanket that she had given Maya, and they immediately called the police. Police arrived, they could not find the pink blanket, and they believe Armando gave it to his roommate and told him to get rid of it. Police searched key fob records and discovered that Armando used a master key to enter Mia's apartment at 4:36 p.m. on September 24th, 2021. They believe he then waited for Mia to arrive home at 5 p.m. They were getting ready to arrest Armando for burglary, but he had up and vanished. On September 27th, 2021, police found the body of Armando Caballero. He had taken his own life. They were able to track GPS coordinates from Armando on the day that Mia disappeared. On October 2nd, 2021, Mia's body was found nearly skeletonized 17 miles away from her apartment complex. She was wearing jeans, bra, and a robe, and it was clear that she was getting ready for the airport. It was clear that Armando became obsessed with Mia and waited inside of her apartment that night. Mia's cause of death was ruled homicide by undetermined means, and she was not SA'd. March of 2022, the Florida Senate passed a law called Mia's Law. This law inhibits increased safety to those who are entering people's apartment complexes.